The night sky over Chicago glowed an unnatural purple from the Xilarian watchtowers. 20 years had passed since the aliens arrived with their massive ships, bringing Earth to its knees in less than a month. Now the once proud city stood in partial ruins, with the alien structures rising between broken human buildings like thorns from infected wounds. Commander John Harrison watched the alien patrol from his hiding spot in a collapsed office building. At 52, his face showed the lines of 2 decades of fighting and hiding. His dark beard was streaked with gray, but his eyes remained sharp and determined. He gripped his modified rifle, a mix of human and stolen Xilarian tech, as the patrol passed below. All clear, he whispered into his communicator. Move to position 3. Across the street, 5 shadows darted between rusted cars. His resistance cell was small but effective. Most were too young to remember life before the invasion, but John remembered. He remembered blue skies without Xilarian ships, cities without alien watchtowers, and a world where humans controlled their own fate. Back at their underground base, a forgotten subway station reinforced with scavenged materials, Lieutenant Lisa Morgan reviewed the day's intelligence reports. Her quick mind and steady nerves had saved the cell countless times. She looked up when John entered. The food raid was successful, she said, pushing a strand of red hair behind her ear. We got enough to last 2 weeks. John nodded. Any word from Greg? Lisa handed him a small data chip. He sent this through the dead drop. Said it's urgent. Greg Peters had the most dangerous job in the Resistance. Every day, he put on a clean suit and worked alongside the Xilarians in their administrative center in Washington, D.C. The aliens believed he was a loyal human helper, grateful for his special treatment and extra rations. They didn't know that every scrap of information he gathered went straight to the Resistance. John inserted the chip into their modified computer. Greg's face appeared on screen, his expression grim. John, they're building something new, Greg said in a hushed voice. Some kind of weapon. I overheard the High Commander calling it the final solution. They're tired of dealing with the Resistance. This weapon, it can detect the specific brain patterns of humans hiding underground. Once operational, there won't be anywhere left to hide. Lisa's face paled. How long do we have? 3 months, maybe 4, Greg continued. I've attached all the files I could steal. I have to go. The night shift is starting. The screen went black. John sat in silence for a moment, then stood up. Call everyone in, he said. We need to plan. Across the room, young Ben Miller looked up from cleaning his weapon. Only 19, he had joined the Resistance after Xilarian soldiers killed his family for missing a curfew. Is it bad, Commander? He asked. John met his gaze. Yes, but we've faced VAD before. Later that night, with the full cell gathered in their hidden meeting room, John explained the situation. 12 faces looked back at him, all that remained of Chicago's main resistance force. Some showed fear, others anger, but all showed determination. If this weapon becomes operational, the resistance ends, John said. Not just us, all of it, everywhere. So we destroy it, said Carlos Jones, their explosives expert. We find it, and we blow it up. Lisa shook her head. It's not that simple. According to Greg's intel, it's being built in their most secure facility, inside the mountain complex in what used to be Colorado. We'd never get close. Then what do we do? Asked Zoe Baker, their youngest member at barely 18. John looked at each of them. We find another way. We always have. I need everyone thinking, planning. There must be something we've missed, some weakness we can exploit. As the meeting broke up, Lisa stayed behind with John. You didn't tell them everything, she said quietly. John sighed. No. Greg's data shows they're already testing the weapon. We might have less time than he thinks. Lisa put her hand on his shoulder. We'll find a way, John. We always do. Outside, the purple glow of the Xilarian towers cast long shadows as another night fell on occupied Earth. But somewhere in the darkness, hope remained alive. The rain fell hard on the crumbling roads outside Seattle. Alan Cruz pulled his worn jacket tighter as he ducked under a fallen tree. At 34, the former park ranger knew these woods better than anyone. Beside him, Susan Wright checked her scanner for Xylarian signals. Her brown eyes narrowed as she studied the device. "Still clear," she whispered, "but we should hurry. The patrol will come through this sector in about 40 minutes. Alan nodded. They had been scouting for 3 days, mapping new Xylarian movements for the resistance. Their food was almost gone, and they were both tired and wet. "Let's cut through that valley," Alan said, pointing ahead. "It's shorter than going around." Susan frowned. "That's not on our maps. Trust me, I hiked here for years before the invasion." They made their way down a steep hill, careful not to slip on the wet leaves. At the bottom, Alan stopped suddenly. Something wasn't right. The rock face ahead looked different. "What's wrong?" Susan asked. Alan approached the cliff wall slowly. This used to be solid rock. Now there's... He ran his hand along the surface and felt a seam. "There's a door here." Susan joined him, her scanner beeping softly. "I'm picking up a power source inside. Weak, but definitely there." They searched the rock face until Alan found a small panel hidden behind vines. When he wiped away the dirt, lights flickered on the panel. "It's human tech," Susan said with surprise. "Military grade, but definitely ours." Alan pressed his palm against the scanner. Nothing happened. Susan tried next, with the same result. "It must need specific clearance," she said. Alan examined the panel more closely and noticed a small keypad. "Maybe there's a code." He tried several military combinations he remembered from his brief time in the National Guard. On his 7th try, the rock face shuddered and began to slide open. Cool air rushed out from the dark opening. They switched on their flashlights and stepped inside. The door closed behind them, and for a moment, panic set in until lights began to flicker on automatically. They stood in a wide tunnel that sloped downward. "This is a military facility," Susan whispered in awe. How did the Xylarians miss this? They followed the tunnel until it opened into an enormous underground hangar. Susan gasped. Inside were 12 sleek spacecraft, unlike any they had seen before. They were clearly human-made but incorporated technology that seemed far beyond what Earth had when the invasion happened. "What is this place?" Alan wondered aloud. A soft hum filled the air, and a blue light appeared in front of them, taking the shape of a human figure. "Welcome to Project Phoenix," said the hologram. "I am Gideon, the artificial intelligence system of this facility. May I ask your security clearance level?" Alan and Susan exchanged glances. We don't have clearance," Alan admitted. "We're with the resistance against the Xylarian occupation." The hologram flickered, processing information. Xylarian occupation. Searching database. Last system update was 19 years and 237 days ago. Please provide current status of Earth Defense Forces. Susan stepped forward. Earth Defense Forces were defeated almost 20 years ago. Earth is under Xylarian control. Humans fight in small resistance groups now. Gideon processed this information. This facility was created as a contingency plan. These ships represent Project Phoenix, mankind's last hope if conventional defenses failed. Alan walked toward the nearest ship, his flashlight beam running along its smooth hull. What can these ships do? They were designed with experimental stealth technology and weapon systems capable of penetrating known alien defenses, Gideon explained. However, they were never fully completed before my systems went into hibernation mode. Susan's eyes widened. Can they be finished? Could they actually work against the Xylarians? With the right personnel and resources, yes, Gideon confirmed. Alan and Susan looked at each other, the first real hope in years shining in their eyes. "We need to contact Commander Harrison," Susan said urgently. "This could change everything." Alan nodded. We just found humanity's second chance." As they quickly documented their discovery, Susan couldn't help but run her hand along one of the ships. "The Xelarians think they've seen everything we can throw at them," she whispered. "They're about to learn they're wrong." 2 weeks after Alan and Susan's discovery, the hidden facility, now called Haven, buzzed with activity. Commander John Harrison stood in the main hangar, watching people work on the ships. Resistance leaders from around the world had gathered here, bringing their best fighters and smartest minds. Karen Hudson adjusted her glasses as she studied the ship's engine. At 47, the former aerospace engineer had spent the last 20 years fixing broken equipment for the Resistance. Now she finally had something worthy of her skills. "The propulsion systems are like nothing I've ever seen," she told John. "These were built with technology that was still theoretical before the invasion." John nodded. "Can they fly?" "Yes, but the weapon systems need a special power source." Karen pointed to empty compartments in the ship's design. "Without it, they're just very fast ships with good shields." Paul Martinez joined them, spreading maps across a makeshift table. The former Army tactician had a mind for strategy that had saved countless resistance fighters over the years. "Even fast ships give us an advantage we've never had," Paul said. His dark eyes scanned the technical readouts. "We could hit targets and disappear before they respond." "That's not enough," John replied. "We need to hurt them badly, not just annoy them, especially with this new weapon they're building." From across the hangar, Steve Williams approached. The former astronaut had been training potential pilots since arriving 3 days ago. "The simulator shows these ships can outmaneuver anything the Xelarians have," Steve said. "But we need those weapons operational to make a real difference." Lisa Morgan entered the hangar, a data pad in her hand. "I just received a new message from Greg," she announced. "He says the Xelarians have a power source called Stellaris at their research facility in Nevada. It matches what Gideon says we need." The holographic figure of Gideon appeared nearby. "The specifications align with our requirements. The Stellaris could power all systems, including the advanced weapons. Nevada is one of their most secured facilities," Paul said, frowning. "Getting in would be nearly impossible." "We don't have a choice," John replied. "Without those weapons, this is all for nothing." They gathered around the table as Paul pulled up schematics of the Nevada facility that Greg had sent. For hours, they discussed possible entry points and security measures. "What if we create a diversion?" Lisa suggested, "not just of the facility, but across the globe." Paul's eyes lit up. "Coordinated attacks by all resistance cells. The Xelarians would have to spread their forces thin. While they're distracted, a small team slips into Nevada and takes the Stellaris," John finished. The plan took shape over the next few days. Using Haven's communication equipment, they contacted resistance cells worldwide. Each would attack Xelarian outposts simultaneously, drawing attention away from Nevada and Haven. Meanwhile, Lisa would lead the infiltration team into the Nevada facility. "I want to go too," John said during their final planning session. Lisa shook her head. "You're needed here. Someone has to coordinate everything. And the people trust you." Deep down, John knew she was right. He had to stay and prepare for what would come after, if they succeeded. On the night before the mission, John walked among the ships, now named the Phoenix Fleet. Each had been assigned a crew and a pilot. They were as ready as they could be. Steve approached him, concern on his face. "Many of these pilots have never flown anything more complicated than a stolen Xelarian transport. They're brave, but they'll have to learn fast," John replied. Later, John addressed everyone gathered in the hangar. The faces looking back at him showed fear, hope, and determination. "Tomorrow, we take the first real step toward freedom," he said. "For 20 years, we've been hiding and surviving. Now we start fighting back, not just to resist, but to win." Lisa stood with her team, already dressed in the stealth gear they would wear for the infiltration. Their faces were serious, understanding the danger of their mission. "Some of us won't make it," John continued. But those who do will help free humanity. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that we're fighting for every human on Earth. We're fighting for our future. As people dispersed to prepare, John caught Lisa's eye across the room. No words were needed. They both knew what was at stake. The plan was set. Tomorrow would decide if humanity had a fighting chance. The night was moonless as Lisa Morgan and her team approached the Nevada facility. They crawled on their stomachs through the dry desert sand, their bodies covered in special suits that blocked Solarian heat sensors. Beside Lisa were three of the Resistance's best: Diane Bell, former police tactical officer; Ryan Cooper, who once served in Army Special Forces; and Frank Wallace, an explosives expert with steady hands. "Security checkpoint ahead," Diane whispered, peering through night vision goggles. 2 guards, just like Greg's intel said. Lisa checked her watch. 3 minutes until the diversions start. Get ready. Around the world at that exact moment, Resistance fighters prepared to attack Solarian outposts. The largest operation in 20 years of occupation was about to begin. At exactly midnight, explosions lit up the sky 100 miles north of their position. The Solarian guards turned toward the distant light. More alarms sounded from other directions. "Now," Lisa ordered. They moved swiftly to the outer fence. Ryan used a device built from stolen Solarian tech to create a hole in the energy barrier. One by one, they slipped through. Inside the compound, they stayed in the shadows, moving from building to building. Greg's information guided them toward the central research lab, where the Stellaris was kept. "This is too easy," Frank muttered as they reached the lab's outer door. "Don't jinx it," Ryan replied as he worked on bypassing the door's security. The door slid open, and they entered a long white hallway. According to Greg's intel, the Stellaris was kept in a secure room at the end of this corridor. Halfway down the hall, Diane stopped suddenly. "Wait, the floor pattern is different from the schematics." Lisa examined the tiles ahead. Some were slightly raised. "Pressure sensors," she whispered. "They must have installed them recently." "Can we go around?" Ryan asked. Lisa shook her head. "No time." "Frank, can you jump it?" Frank studied the distance. "Maybe. Let me try first." He backed up, then ran and leaped over the section of pressure-sensitive tiles. He landed safely on the other side, but his foot slipped at the last second, touching the edge of one tile. An alarm screamed through the facility. "Run," Lisa shouted. "Complete the mission." They all jumped the tiles and sprinted toward the secure room. Ryan quickly worked on the final door while the others prepared for guards. The door opened to reveal a small glowing crystal floating in a containment field. The Stellaris. Lisa carefully approached it. "How do we get it out?" she asked. Diane handed her a device. "This should disrupt the field without damaging the crystal." As Lisa worked on the containment field, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway. Solarian guards were coming. Frank unstrapped his backpack. "Get the Stellaris. I'll hold them off." "No," Lisa protested. "We all leave together." Frank smiled sadly. "Someone has to slow them down, or none of us makes it. Besides, I touched that sensor. My mistake, my fix." Before anyone could argue, the containment field dropped, and the Stellaris fell into Lisa's hands. It was smaller than she expected, about the size of an apple, yet it pulsed with incredible energy. "Go out the back exit," Frank said, setting up explosives at the door. "I've got this." Ryan found the emergency exit Greg had mentioned. "This way." Lisa gripped Frank's shoulder. "Your sacrifice won't be forgotten." "Just make it count," he replied. "Now go." Lisa, Diane, and Ryan fled through the back exit as Solarian guards reached the main door. They heard Frank's voice challenging the aliens, followed by a massive explosion that shook the entire building. They ran into the desert night, the precious Stellaris secured in a special container. Above them, the sky flashed with explosions as resistance fighters around the world executed their attacks. "Transport is waiting 5 miles east," Diane said between breaths. As they ran, Lisa clutched the container tightly. The mission was successful, but the cost was already high. Frank was just the first casualty of what would become humanity's greatest counterattack. By dawn, they'd reached the hidden transport that would take them back to Haven. As they lifted off, Lisa looked back at the facility, now partially collapsed from Frank's final act. "Did the other diversions work?" Ryan asked. Lisa checked the reports coming in on their secure radio. Her face grew grim. "Yes, but many didn't make it. Resistance cells in London and Tokyo were completely wiped out. The price of hope was steep, but as the transport sped toward Haven with the precious Stellaris, Lisa knew they had just changed the course of the war." The mood at Haven was mixed when Lisa's team returned with the Stellaris. People celebrated their success, but mourned those lost in the diversionary attacks. John Harrison watched as Karen Hudson carefully placed the crystal into the first ship's power chamber. The Stellaris glowed brighter, pulsing with blue-white energy. "Remarkable," Karen whispered. "The power readings are off the charts." Gideon's hologram appeared beside them. "The Stellaris can be split into 12 equal parts, one for each ship. Its energy is self-sustaining and will not diminish when divided." "How long will it take to install in all ships?" John asked. 3 days, Karen replied. "Maybe 2 if we work around the clock." John nodded. "We work around the clock. The Xilarians will be on high alert after our attacks." In the simulator room, Steve Williams pushed the pilots hard. Former civilian pilot Amy Turner showed natural talent, her hands steady on the controls as she completed another difficult maneuver. "Good job," Steve said. "You'll lead Blue Squadron." Amy wiped sweat from her forehead. "Are you sure? I've never flown anything real except crop dusters." "Sometimes the best pilots are the ones who haven't learned bad habits," Steve replied. "You have instinct, and that's something I can't teach." In another simulator, Kevin Boyd, a former Air Force pilot who had escaped a Xilarian prison camp, was breaking all the training records. His face showed intense focus as he practiced attack runs. "He's the best I've seen," Steve told John later. "I want him leading Red Squadron for the attack on the defense grid." While the pilots trained, Hall Martinez finalized the battle plans. The Phoenix fleet would target 3 key locations: the orbital command station, the planetary defense grid, and the main Xilarian base in Washington, D.C. "If we take out these 3 targets, their control structure falls apart," Paul explained to the squadron leaders. "They're not used to fighting without central command." On the second day of preparations, the facility's alarms suddenly blared. A single figure appeared at the entrance, bloody and exhausted. It was Greg Peters. "My cover was blown," he gasped as medics rushed to his side. "Had to fight my way out." Once stable, Greg shared crucial information. "They're panicking after the attacks and the Stellaris theft. The High Commander has ordered all ships to protect their key installations." He handed John a small data device. "Their complete battle plans and defensive schematics. I grabbed it before I ran." This new intelligence was gold. Paul immediately adjusted their attack strategy based on the Xilarian deployment details. "They've reinforced the orbital station, but left gaps in the defense grid coverage," Paul told John. "We can exploit that." By the 3rd day, all 12 ships had been equipped with Stellaris power cores. The formerly dark hangar now glowed with blue light from the charged vessels. Each ship had been named and assigned a crew. The flagship, piloted by John himself, was called Defiance. That evening, John gathered everyone in the hangar for a final briefing. Nearly 200 people stood before him: pilots, crew members, and support staff. All had worked tirelessly to prepare for this moment. "Tomorrow at dawn, we launch humanity's most important mission," John said. "For 20 years, the Xilarians have taken our home, our resources, and too many of our lives. Tomorrow, we start taking it all back." He walked among them, meeting their eyes. Some looked scared, others determined. "This won't be easy. We'll lose good people, But whether we succeed or fail, the Xilarians will know that humans aren't beaten. We aren't just survivors anymore. We're fighters." Lisa stood beside him, her face showing the same resolve that had kept her alive through 20 years of occupation. "Get some rest," John finished. "Tomorrow, we make history." Later, alone in his quarters, John looked at an old photo of Earth taken from space before the invasion. The planet looked peaceful, beautiful. No purple Xilarian structures, no orbital shipyards darkening the skies. "We're coming for you," he whispered to the distant aliens who had stolen their world. "And you won't see us coming." As the resistance fighters tried to sleep, excitement and fear kept many awake. The battle for Earth would begin in just a few hours. Dawn broke over Haven as the Phoenix fleet prepared to launch. In the flagship Defiance, John Harrison strapped himself into the commander's chair. Lisa Morgan sat at the tactical station beside him, her face tense but determined. "All ships report ready," she said. John nodded. "Open hangar doors. Activate stealth systems." The massive underground doors slid open, revealing the gray morning sky. One by one, the 12 ships of the Phoenix fleet rose silently into the air, their Stellaris-powered stealth systems making them nearly invisible to Xilarian sensors. "Blue Squadron, form up," Amy Turner called from her ship. 4 vessels moved into formation behind her. "Red Squadron ready," Kevin Boyd reported, his 5 ships taking position. John's voice came through all communication channels. "Remember the plan. Blue Squadron targets the orbital command station. Red Squadron takes out the defense grid. The Defiance will lead the attack on the Washington base." The ships accelerated upward, breaking through the clouds. For the first time in 20 years, humans were going on the offensive against their alien conquerors. As they reached the edge of space, the Earth curved below them. The Xilarian Orbital Command Station loomed ahead, a massive structure shaped like a giant wheel, with spikes extending outward. Hundreds of alien ships patrolled around it. "They have no idea we're here," Lisa said, checking her sensors. "Stealth systems holding." John took a deep breath. "All ships, weapons hot. Disengage stealth on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." The Phoenix fleet suddenly appeared in space, catching the Xilarians completely by surprise. Blue Squadron, led by Amy, streaked toward the command station. "Target their communication arrays first," Amy ordered her pilots. The Stellaris-powered weapons fired brilliant blue beams that cut through Xilarian shields like they weren't even there. The command station's outer ring exploded in a chain of fireballs. Xilarian ships scrambled to respond, but their weapons seemed to bounce off the Phoenix fleet's shields. "It's working," Amy shouted as her squadron made another attack run. "Their weapons can't penetrate our shields." Meanwhile, Kevin's Red Squadron dove toward Earth, targeting the planetary defense grid. These enormous weapons, placed at strategic points around the globe, had kept humanity from fighting back for 20 years. "Grid control center in sight," Kevin reported, firing main cannons. His squadron's combined firepower struck the control center in Antarctica. Ice and metal erupted into space as the facility collapsed. Back in orbit, the Xilarians were recovering from their surprise. Their supreme commander, Karlox, ordered all forces to converge on the human fleet. "Enemy reinforcements incoming," Lisa warned. Hundreds of ships approaching from the lunar base. The battle intensified. Despite their superior technology, the Phoenix fleet was outnumbered. A Xilarian cruiser rammed one of Blue Squadron's ships, destroying both vessels in a massive explosion. "We lost the courage," Amy reported, her voice shaking. "Jenkins and his crew are gone." Kevin's squadron was taking heavy fire as well. His ship shuddered as a Xilarian beam grazed their hull. "Shield at 40%, his pilot called out. "Another hit like that, and we're done." John made a quick decision. "Red Squadron, complete your mission and retreat to Haven. Blue Squadron, continue the attack on the command station." The Defiance, accompanied by its 2 escort ships, pushed toward Washington, D.C. As they entered the atmosphere, Solarian fighters swarmed around them. One of the escorts exploded, ripped apart by concentrated enemy fire. Inside the Defiance, an explosion rocked the bridge. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and smoke filled the air. "Direct hit," Lisa reported. "Engine 3 is gone. Weapons still online, but shields failing." John looked at the tactical display. They were approaching the Washington, D.C. Solarian headquarters, the center of the alien occupation. "Can we still reach the target?" he asked. The pilot nodded grimly. "Yes, sir. But I don't think we can pull up afterward." John made the hardest decision of his life. "Lisa, you and the remaining crew take the escape pods. I'll guide the ship in." "John." "No." Lisa protested. "There has to be another way." Another explosion rocked the ship. More systems failed. "There isn't," John said quietly. "This was always going to be a one-way trip for me. Now go, make sure this sacrifice means something." As Lisa and the crew reluctantly headed for the escape pods, John sat alone on the bridge, guiding the damaged Defiance toward its final target. The Defiance streaked through the sky like a burning arrow, smoke trailing behind it. Inside the damaged bridge, John Harrison gripped the controls. Washington, D.C. spread out below him. Once America's proud capital, now a twisted landscape of Solarian buildings and towers. In the center stood the massive pyramid-shaped headquarters where Supreme Commander Garlox directed the occupation of Earth. John opened a channel to all human frequencies worldwide. "This is Commander Harrison. To all resistance fighters and every human still hoping for freedom, watch the sky over Washington. Today, we take back our world." The Defiance accelerated, its damaged engines screaming in protest. Solarian defense ships fired desperately, trying to stop the human vessel, but it was too late. John aimed directly for the center of the alien headquarters. 20 years is long enough," John whispered. "This is for Earth." The ship crashed into the pyramid with massive force. The Stellaris power core exploded on impact, creating a blinding flash of blue-white light. The Solarian headquarters collapsed in a massive fireball that rose high into the sky. From her escape pod, Lisa watched the explosion with tears in her eyes. "Goodbye, John," she whispered. Miles away, Amy Turner's Blue Squadron completed their attack on the orbital command station. The massive wheel-shaped structure broke apart, sending debris spinning into space. "Orbital command is destroyed," Amy reported, her voice tired but triumphant. Kevin Boyd's voice came through the communication system. "Defense grid is offline. We took heavy losses, but we did it." Without their central command, defense grid, and supreme commander, the Solarian forces across the planet fell into chaos. They had never expected to fight without clear orders from above. Resistance fighters, watching the explosion over Washington, knew what it meant. From hidden bases and underground bunkers, they emerged to attack the confused Solarian outposts. In London, Paris, Tokyo, and hundreds of other cities, humans rose up against their weakened oppressors. 3 days after the battle, Lisa gathered the remaining Phoenix Fleet crews and resistance leaders at Haven. Her face showed the strain of loss, but also new determination. "John gave his life to create this opportunity," she said. "We can't waste it. The Solarians are retreating to their remaining strongholds, but they're still dangerous." Paul Martinez pointed to a map showing Solarian positions. "They're requesting a treaty. They want to negotiate terms." "No," Lisa said firmly. "No negotiations. After 20 years of brutal occupation, we demand their unconditional surrender. Humanity will accept nothing less." The final battles lasted 2 more months. One by one, Solarian strongholds fell to the combined forces of the Phoenix Fleet and resistance fighters. Some aliens tried to escape in their ships, but the Stellaris-powered weapons prevented most from leaving Earth's atmosphere. 3 months after John's sacrifice, a memorial service was held in the ruins of Washington. People from around the world gathered to honor those who had died in the liberation of Earth. A simple stone monument bore the names of the fallen, with John Harrison's name at the top. Lisa, now leading the Provisional World Government, stood before the crowd. Today we remember those who gave everything for our freedom. But we also look to the future. The Exilarians left behind technology that we can use to rebuild our world better than before. 6 months later, Amy Turner piloted a new ship into orbit around Mars. Through the view screen, she watched as the first human colony on another planet took shape. Construction teams used modified Silurian technology to build habitats that could withstand the harsh Martian environment. Amy turned her ship to look back at Earth, now free from Silurian control. The planet looked different. Some scars from the occupation would take generations to heal, but it was theirs again. Her communications console beeped. It was Kevin Boyd, calling from Earth. "Amy, you need to return immediately," he said, his voice urgent. "Long-range sensors are picking up something near Jupiter. Ships are coming, not Silurian, something else entirely." Amy stared at the data on her screen. "I'm on my way." As her ship turned back toward Earth, she thought about what they had accomplished and what might lie ahead. Humanity had won its freedom and proved its strength. Whatever was coming next would find not a conquered species, but a united one ready to defend its home. Earth wasn't alone in the galaxy, but it was free again. And this time, they would be ready.